Actually, that's a good place that I like to jump in because we want to keep this to a half an hour or so.
Sure.
We talked about John Bel Edwards not necessarily being your average Democrat, certainly a good fit Louisiana, but that brings us to the other Democrats. And actually, John Bel Edwards got name checked last night. So we want to take a few minutes to talk about last night's Democratic debate and the polling as far as the state of the Democratic primary race is right now. So did everybody watch the debate last night? Anybody have some urgent thoughts? It seemed sort of a little more status quo than some of the other ones. I don't know if there was a huge moment that some of the other debates
Drew,
had.
I'm curious, real quick, who won, in your opinion? Quick,
Joe
one
Biden.
word. Joe Biden. Podcool, who won?
Mayor Pete.
Okay. Jay Miles, who won?
I'm gonna say Amy Klobuchar. I thought she had a decent night there.
Gotcha. Al Dunson.
Whoever the media decides to talk about for the next week. Which,
All right, Al Dunson's just angry at the world. Obviously, Yang Gang won. Clear win. Yang media blackout. Okay. So based on that, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the RCP average now, but what's the breakdown? Is there any, this includes some of the stuff, I know some people are doing overnight stuff, which is methodologically interesting, but in there, right? Or no?
I don't think so.
Who looks at
it
this?
would
Al
be
Dunson, what are we looking at here?
It would be anything that RCP has included as of this morning, which probably doesn't include that stuff. So yeah, I mean, these are the averages as of today for the national, and then some of the early states. Shout out to John Ralston, Nevada made it. And so, Biden still leads as he has been this entire time at the national level. But interestingly, Iowa, New Hampshire are getting, Warren took a lead in Iowa a little while ago. Now Buttigieg has taken that lead. You see that it's a four-man race, four-man and women race there with Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Buttigieg, and everyone else is sort of lagging behind. And I'm not sure if anyone else will be able to sort of clear that 15% threshold. New Hampshire, sort of the same story. There's a logjam at the top, and there's not a real clear front runner. And then Nevada and South Carolina, a little bit less of that story. You do see the Biden lead persist there. Bottom right, you also have betting odds. And so, I mean, Warren a few weeks ago was sort of the dead-on favorite, even though she didn't really have a lead anywhere outside of maybe Iowa and New Hampshire. And that has now sort of plummeted down.
So I'm curious, who around, based on what everyone said, who thinks Biden is still going to win South Carolina, assuming, which it won't happen, assuming who's leading now? So assuming Buttigieg wins Iowa, Warren wins New Hampshire, Biden wins Nevada. If those three happen, as the polling does now, which it won't, but let's assume it does Biden still win South Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay.
If Biden can win Nevada, then he would win South Carolina, yeah.
So the consensus is Biden can come in fourth in Iowa, still maintain top three in New Hampshire, and then still ride those not first place finishes to first in Nevada and South Carolina?
I think that's a little different than your question. You were saying, assuming Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada happens, will South Carolina happen? I think if Biden actually comes in fourth in Iowa, I don't see how he could come in first in Nevada.
But that's my point is do we think, we don't think this is the order now, right? We don't think Iowa's going to go the way it is, New Hampshire's going to go the way it is, Nevada's going to go the way it is, or South Carolina, as these polls describe, correct?
No,
Probably not. But I mean, if it does, the difference between second and fourth in Iowa is nothing. I mean, it's meaningless.
I guess what I'm getting around to is Iowa's the only one that's the closest. Everything after Iowa is literally just not random, but it's going to be pretty out there. Right. If Buttigieg wins Iowa, could he run the table?
No.
Could he win
Not
South Carolina?
Carolina?
Okay.
Now, I guess where do people fall on the question of whether or not your answer comes down to the effects of sequencing or the effects of the demographic composition of these electorates? It seems to me that Scott's sort of making the assumption that sequencing is playing a huge role here, and I probably am closer to Julian Castro's position, where the demographics here are kind of what's going to drive the major differences between, say, Iowa and New Hampshire and some of these other states. What does the desk think about kind of sequence versus demographics in answering that question?
So I'll take the first jab at it. I think sequencing is very important. One caveat being that Iowa and New Hampshire do like to sort of play spoiler on each other. So, the result of Iowa doesn't necessarily carry over into New Hampshire. But I do think that if Biden comes in fourth in Iowa, even if it's just by a couple percentage points, even if he's, let's call it 7 points behind the winner, I think the narrative around that is absolutely terrible for him, and that probably starts him on a death spiral. And so by the time that you get to South Carolina, there might be a candidate that is able to win over those voters that Biden currently has.
Right, that's the question, right? Does Warren or Buttigieg suddenly look more appealing, or Bernie Sanders suddenly look more appealing in South Carolina, just because Biden hasn't gotten good press out of those two races? And I agree. I mean, you can go back and look at 2008, which was a crazy year where Iowa was like, January 2nd or something. And it had been a back and forth in polling, between Clinton and Obama. Obama wins Iowa, and suddenly he shoots like a 20-point lead in South Carolina and never loses it. I'm just not sure that that's going to happen with whomever wins Iowa this year. The candidates, they're just not anywhere right now in South Carolina. And to think they're suddenly going to coalesce around this person because they won Iowa and New Hampshire, they're different voters, And Bernie Sanders complained about in 2016. He's like, Hillary Clinton was picked by conservative Democrats. Well, sort of, yeah. It's a different world.
And they voted. Moving on to the endorsement tracker slide, Austin. It's interesting. I think there was just an endorsement today. Senator Harris got someone out of South Carolina, I think, but Joe Biden, 143 points endorsements. So this is all according to 538. Wow, John Delaney has 6 endorsements. Who endorsed John Delaney? Is he still running?
Maybe have some friends.
John Delaney's still running. Okay, all right. Michael Bennett still running, has 5. I mean, here's the around the do endorsements matter? The age-old question: do endorsements matter? Pod cool.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes down to the weight, how much we say they matter, but we're definitely still living in a party decides world. We could say 2016 Republican was an outlier, but the 2016 Democrat went according to plan. So I just need to see some more evidence to throw the theory.
So just to argue there, Kamala Harris has 92 endorsement points, the second most endorsement points, but she is polling right around Andrew Yang, who is not on the endorsement tracker, by the way. Continued Yang media blackout. So how does that correlation square with your assessment?
I mean, if we look at the leader right now, it's kind of about who has the commanding lead, and Joe Biden's up hugely compared to some of these people, and based on our polling discussion that we just had, he seems pretty well situated. Maybe not the clear polling favorite, but I think there certainly is some correlation here. Yes, obviously, when you start looking at the second and third place people, those sorts of things matter. But also, I just don't know if the graphic that we're looking at right now, this just overall endorsements tracker, captures the nuances of how endorsements matter. I think dates matter. I think locations matter, and those sorts of things. But if we just kind of add them up together, maybe that's not telling the full story that we care about. But just because Kamala Harris is polling closer to Andrew Yang doesn't necessarily mean we need to throw out the idea that endorsements don't matter.
Well, are endorsements, what's the cause and effect relationship with endorsements? Do people do well because they get endorsements, or are they getting endorsements because they thought they're going to do well if they're not necessarily in the polling, right? I mean, these professional politicians, for the most part, being tracked. They have their finger on the pulse of this. They kind of see where they think is going to go, and they want to be on the train.
A bit of both, right? Because you have when you get endorsements, you get good press out of it, which in turn helps you. But also politicians, especially in such a crowded race like this one, they want to latch on to the winner. They want to latch on to someone who has a shot. So I think that's why, for instance, you have Pete Buttigieg recently has sort of seen an increase in the polling, but the endorsements are lagging that. He hasn't gained a lot of endorsements out of this yet. I think right now endorsements are kind of somewhat stalled in the sense that Democratic politicians across the country are sort of waiting and seeing who's legit and who's just the flavor of the month. Obviously, there's concerns about Biden, but there hasn't been a coalescing around any other candidate. There's been a little bit of a Warren bump, then now there's a little bit of a Buttigieg bump, but we don't know how real those are. My guess is that once the primaries start happening, then you'll see sort of more of a wave of endorsements once it becomes clear who can win and who doesn't really have a shot at winning.
And that goes back to the poll a little bit. Do we think Buttigieg is, he's the most recent one to get a bump? Do we think he's the last one? Can he ride this to February?
I think he peaked a little early. I think, whoever's the flavor of the month right before Iowa has a shot at winning. And then obviously the front runner, which I think you still have to call Joe Biden the front runner given the holistic national polling. That I think that's what it is. I think he peaked 2 months too early.
So, final slide we're taking a look at before we kind of go into the next topic. These are, I guess, the most recent polls by state. The St. Anselm one is the one that everyone was talking about over the last 24, 48 hours that had Pete up 10. I think there were some questions about sample size and a couple other things, but it's a poll, so there's some data there. South Carolina, there's the plus 20 there. Biden plus 10 in Nevada, and then Buttigieg with the civics poll out of Iowa. Any final thoughts? I mean, it's kind of a good segue, as Al Dunson was saying, flavor of the month stuff. Our experience with Rubio was timing's everything. I mean, just ask Scott Walker, who was, the leader in June of 2015, or ask Rudy Giuliani, who was the leader in, fall of 2007. It's not about when you're the leader. It's about, when you're the leader. It is all about when you're the leader right before. I don't know. Any closing thoughts on how this is going to end up? What do you think, Jay Miles?
Oh, the bump for Mayor Pete in Iowa has definitely been something, and now, but looking forward to South Carolina. I mean, if he keeps polling at 0% of the black vote, it's just hard long term to see how he gets it, and that's basically, I think, what we're seeing.
Final around the desk question: Is this decided at the convention or before the convention? Drew?
My head says before, but my chaos-loving heart says at.
Podcool, what do you think?
Before, for sure.
Before? I also think before. Al Dunson?
I could be the contrarian. I think it's much more likely to be decided for, but I think that all the right ingredients for a contested convention are there. I don't know if that's enough to actually cause a contested convention, but I think the ingredients are there. I think some candidates are going to be selfish and stay in the race, kind of like in 2016 when that sort of happened, and it sort of caused some delegates to be sort of scattered around. Now, in 2016, that was not enough for a contested convention. There were only 3 candidates at the end, though. If you end up having a 4 or 5 person race, maybe. But I think much more likely to be before.
So you're taking
one last thought on that, though. One player that really hasn't entered the arena yet is Michael Bloomberg. I don't think he's the most popular guy in the world, but we're going to find out if $500 million can buy you some love because he's going to spend it.
Well, and if $500 million doesn't buy you love, you can see if the next $500 million buys you some love. Jay Miles, though, what do you think? Before or at the convention, this will be decided?
I'm going to say before, but I do agree with who said that if it were going to be decided at the convention, the ingredients would be there.